I know you're going to judge me. And honestly, after hearing the whole story, you might even think I'm a psychopath. But I have to ask you, if your entire future was destroyed by one petty, insecure man, and you were given the keys to his kingdom, wouldn't you lock him out of it? Wouldn't you seize the opportunity for the most perfect, irreversible, and deeply satisfying form of corporate justice? That's what I did. I was the intern, the invisible guy, the one who was supposed to be grateful just to be in the room, and in the end, I was the ghost in the machine that made my former boss, Marcus, a man who ran a multi-million-dollar tech company, wake up one morning to find he was completely locked out of his own life's work. The whole thing was gone because of one single line of code I wrote. Tell me, was I wrong for what I did? Let me take you back to where this all started, because to understand the magnitude of my action, you have to understand the depth of the betrayal. I started at Innovate Tech Solutions 7 months ago. It wasn't my dream company, but it was the company in my city, a fast-growing software firm specializing in proprietary CRM systems. Getting the internship was a huge deal for me. I was a senior in college, studying computer science, and I needed this placement to graduate and, more importantly, to get a real job offer. I was ecstatic. Marcus, the CEO and co-founder, was a legend in the local tech scene. He was charismatic, always impeccably dressed, and spoke with this booming, confident voice that made you believe every word he said was gospel. But there was a darkness beneath the polish, a deep insecurity masked by his need for absolute control and worship. I didn't see it at first, of course. I just saw the mentor I desperately wanted. I was assigned to the core systems team, which essentially meant I was doing the grunt work on the massive interconnected code base that ran everything from the customer-facing interface to the internal payroll and asset management. I learned the whole system inside and out. I knew the functions, the classes, the dependencies. I knew the skeleton key to the entire operation. My main project, ironically, was to streamline the internal authentication protocol, essentially making a unified login system for all of Innovatech's various platforms. It was complex, involving rewriting parts of the global authorization module, a file named auth.global.py. I spent weeks on it, poring over the convoluted logic Marcus and his co-founder had originally written years ago. I streamlined hundreds of lines of code into a tight, elegant function. Marcus initially was impressed. He even took me out to lunch, telling me I was a natural fit and talking about a full-time offer after graduation. I felt like I was on top of the world. Then things started to change. Marcus had an unwritten rule. No one left the office before he did. He didn't enforce it with a sign or a memo. He enforced it with an atmosphere of icy disapproval and passive-aggressive comments about dedication and the difference between an employee and an owner. I was pulling 14-hour days, sometimes more, just to avoid his silent judgment. I was young though, so I dismissed it as typical corporate hustle. The real trouble started with Lisa. Lisa was a graphic designer, and she had just completed a stunning redesign of our primary application's UI. It was sleek, modern, and everyone in the office agreed it was a game changer. She was also outspoken and, frankly, didn't play Marcus's childish games. One evening, after working on a huge sprint for almost 16 hours, she packed up at 6 p.m., just before Marcus usually wrapped up. As she was walking out, Marcus stopped her, not even looking up from his laptop. Leaving early, Lisa? Some of us actually have a passion for this company. Lisa, bless her heart, didn't back down. I finished my deliverables 2 hours ago, Marcus. I have a life outside of Innovatech. Maybe you should try one. The office went silent. The air crackled with tension. The next morning, Lisa's keycard didn't work. Her email was locked. Her workstation was wiped clean. Marcus, radiating an aura of cold superiority, announced at the morning stand-up that Lisa had been released due to a failure to integrate with the company's core values of dedication and teamwork. I saw the fear in everyone's eyes. It was a clear message: you will bow to me or you will be erased. And it wasn't even about her work. It was about her audacity to challenge his authority. This was the first major crack in my illusion of Marcus the mentor. But I still told myself I needed the job. I kept my head down. I worked harder. My breaking point came 3 weeks before my internship was scheduled to end. I had submitted my final report, a comprehensive document detailing all the code changes I had implemented, including the revamped authorization module. I was supposed to have a final review with Marcus, which would culminate in the job offer. I walked into his office, ready to celebrate. He was sitting there, not smiling, but looking like a judge, about to deliver a death sentence. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was my final performance review. It was scathing. It said I was technically proficient but severely lacking in professional maturity, that my commitment to the Innovatech vision was questionable, and that I frequently displayed a disruptive lack of respect for established organizational hierarchies. I was completely blindsided. I hadn't disrupted anything. I was the quietest person in the room. I stammered, asking what this meant. He leaned back, his face a mask of condescending pity. It means, my name, that we won't be offering you a full-time position. You're simply not a good cultural fit. But, hey, you got the experience, right? Something to put on your resume. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. He made it sound like I was lucky to have even wasted my time there. The kicker, my final project, the authentication module, was listed under his own name on the internal repository, with a note saying it was completed under my direct supervision. He didn't just fire me, he invalidated my entire 7 months of work and sabotaged my professional reputation before it even began, all because he probably sensed I saw through his fragile ego, or maybe just because he didn't like the way I tied my shoes that day. My college credit was dependent on that successful review, and suddenly my graduation, my degree, and my career were all on the line. I walked out of that office a ghost, shattered and filled with a cold, righteous fury I didn't know I possessed. I had 2 weeks left to quietly transition my work. I was numb. So that's the situation I was in. I had poured my soul into that company, only to be crushed under the heel of an egomaniac for daring to exist slightly outside his perfect orbit. I was hurt, I was broke, and I was looking at a possible failure to graduate. I spent a week stewing, trying to find a moral high ground, trying to be the bigger person. But the image of Marcus, smug and untouchable, sitting on the throne of my stolen work, kept replaying in my mind. Then I remembered Auth, Global, Buy. I remembered the single function I had introduced, the one that handled the initial token generation for the super admin account, which of course was Marcus's primary login across all systems. I was still technically on the network for my 2-week transition period, and no one had thought to revoke my credentials yet. I had access to everything. I had to make a choice. Let him win or fight back with the only weapon I had, knowledge. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just walked away and hoped for the best, or would you have risked everything for a piece of justice? I decided I was done playing nice. I decided Marcus needed a lesson in humility that no HR department could ever deliver. I came in on a Saturday, supposedly to finalize documentation. The office was deserted. I sat down at my workstation, opened the main repository, and found auth global.py. Deep within the new function I had written, I found the line of code that defined the core encryption seed for the super admin token, a complex, constantly refreshing string that was the digital fingerprint of Marcus's access. The original code was solid, but I added one single, tiny, seemingly innocuous conditional statement right before the token was generated. This statement checked for a very specific, unique combination of characters in the user's metadata, a combination that only existed in Marcus's specific profile, and if it found it, it didn't generate an error, it just flipped the Boolean value for the encryption seed. It didn't change the password, it changed the key that validated the password, making his correct password appear incorrect to the system, but only when his super admin account tried to log in. I didn't delete anything, I didn't change any security logs, I just introduced a beautiful, insidious little logic bomb. I called the function update auth global v2 1 security patch, It looked like just another routine update. I committed the change, pushed it to the live server, a simple, quiet 4-second operation, and then I logged off, deleted my local cache, and walked out the door for the final time. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilarating calm. The following Monday was my last official day. I walked in, handed over my laptop and my badge, accepted my final, sad little check, and smiled politely. Marcus didn't even look at me. Later that afternoon, the quiet tension started. First, a flurry of hurried phone calls in the hall. Then, the IT manager, Bob, was practically running around. By Tuesday, the entire office was buzzing. The rumors were insane. Marcus couldn't access the master database. Then, he couldn't access his payroll system. Then, he couldn't even access the internal email server. His super admin token, the golden ticket that gave him control over every digital aspect of Innovatech Solutions, had been rendered useless by my single line of code. He was locked out of his own life. The genius of my patch was that it was targeted only at the super admin account login process. Other accounts, the regular employee logins, which were necessary to keep the company running, were untouched. Only Marcus, the single point of failure who demanded absolute control, was shut down. He couldn't log in to reassign his privileges. He couldn't log in to revert the code. The only people who could legally do that were Marcus and his co-founder, David. David, however, had cashed out and moved to the Cayman Islands 3 years prior, and his old credentials, which Marcus had never bothered to revoke, because why would he, had expired long ago. My code had essentially placed a digitally impenetrable, invisible wall around Marcus's access. The entire infrastructure was running, but the man at the top couldn't see the controls, let alone touch them. The aftermath was pure, glorious chaos. For days, Marcus was a screaming mess. He called in external forensics teams who spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to find the back door. They couldn't, because it wasn't a back door. And it was a logic error built into the system by the developer and sanctioned by the CEO himself when he approved the general project. The problem wasn't a hack. It was a digital existential crisis. I heard all this from Bob, the IT manager, who called me a week later, utterly desperate. Bob was a good guy, and I felt a pang of guilt for him, but I held my ground. He asked me if I knew anything about the Auth Global V2 1 update. I played dumb, saying, oh, that was just my final security patch part of the transition. It should have been fine. Maybe the credentials got corrupted somehow. Tell him to try generating a new token from the backend database if he can access that. Bob, frantic, told me that was the problem. Marcus couldn't access the backend database to generate the token because he couldn't log in. I had created a perfect loop of self-inflicted impotence. The company teetered on the brink. Without the CEO's central control, proprietary projects ground to a halt. Financial reporting became impossible. Marcus, in a final, pathetic act of desperation, eventually had to humble himself and call David in the Caymans. David, who had watched Marcus become an overbearing tyrant from afar, laughed in his face, citing the terms of their original partnership agreement. He would only return for an emergency board meeting, and only if Marcus personally paid him an astronomical consulting fee and agreed to give him back his original ownership stake. Innovatech Solutions was saved, but Marcus was financially ruined and structurally diminished. He was forced to give up a significant portion of his control just to regain the ability to click a mouse. He never proved it was me. He never even suspected the intern who had slaved away in the corner. He blamed the whole thing on a catastrophic server error. My college, however, was satisfied with my comprehensive project report, which I used as evidence of my successful internship, the very report Marcus had dismissed. I got my credit, I graduated, and I got a fantastic job at a competitor who was delighted to hire the young talent, who was surprisingly insightful about Innovatech's internal systems. I now sit here building my own life, while Marcus is a shadow of his former self, constantly looking over his shoulder, forever wondering if the ghost in the machine will return. I don't regret it for a second. It wasn't about money. It was about the secret code rewrite of the Golden Rule. Treat people with respect, or the invisible intern you scorned might just have the power to erase you. So that's the whole mess. I took away his power, his control, and his smug certainty. It was shocking, it was corporate justice, and it was undeniably sweet. What do you think? Like this video if you were on my side, if you think Marcus got exactly what he deserved. Subscribe for more stories like this, where the small guy gets a chance to even the scales. And seriously, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.